David and Goliath, the boy who was not afraid. Before David ever became a king, before people sang songs about him, before he wore a crown, sat on a throne, or led an army. David was just a young shepherd boy. He smelled like sheep. He spent his days under the hot sun, watching over his father's flock. He knew how to play the harp. He knew how to pray. He knew how to fight off wild animals when they came near his sheep. But one day, David walked into a battlefield where grown men were shaking with fear, and standing in front of them was a giant so tall, so loud, and so terrifying that an entire army forgot who their God was. But David did not forget. And what happened next would teach everyone that courage is not about being the biggest. It is about trusting the God who is bigger than everything. Welcome to Oma's Story Nook Jr., where little whispers become big wonders, and every story carries a lesson that can grow inside your heart. Today's story is about a boy, a giant, and a God who never loses a battle. So come closer, little listener. Because this is the story of David and Goliath, the boy who was not afraid. The Valley of Fear. The morning sun rose over the hills of Israel, painting the sky with gold and orange. But in the valley below, there was no peace. Two armies stood on opposite mountains. On one side stood the army of Israel. On the other side stood the Philistines. Between them was a wide valley, quiet except for the clanking of armor, the nervous shifting of soldiers, and the distant sound of war horns. The Israelite soldiers stood in rows, holding shields and spears. Their faces were serious, but their hearts were heavy. Because every morning and every evening the same terrifying thing happened. A man stepped out from the Philistine army, but he was not an ordinary man. His name was Goliath. He was huge, taller than everyone around him. His armor was heavy. His spear was enormous. His voice thundered across the valley like a storm. When he walked, the ground seemed to tremble. When he spoke, even brave soldiers stepped backward. Goliath came forward and shouted to the Israelites, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Choose a man and let him come down to me." His voice rolled across the valley. The soldiers froze. Goliath continued mocking them.
If one man could defeat him, the Philistines would serve Israel. But if Goliath won, Israel would serve the Philistines.
Day after day, he shouted. Day after day, he insulted them. Day after day, the men of Israel listened. And day after day, they were afraid. King Saul was afraid too. The soldiers whispered among themselves.
He is too big. His armor is too strong. No one can fight him. What if he kills us?
Fear moved through the camp like a shadow. Some men tried to look brave, but their hands trembled. Some tightened their helmets, but their knees felt weak. Some stared at the ground, hoping Goliath would stop shouting. But Goliath did not stop. For 40 days, morning and evening, he came forward and challenged them. 40 days of fear. 40 days of insults. 40 days of men forgetting that the God who had helped Israel before was still with them now. Far away from the battlefield, in the fields of Bethlehem, a young boy named David had no idea that this giant was terrifying an army. David was the youngest son of Jesse. His older brothers had gone to war with King Saul, but David stayed home to watch the sheep. Some people might have thought, he is just a shepherd. But God saw more than that. David was faithful in the small things. When nobody clapped for him, he still did his work. When nobody praised him, he still protected the sheep. When no one important was watching, God was watching. David would sit under the open sky with his harp, singing songs to God. Sometimes when the sheep wandered, he gently guided them back. Sometimes when danger came, he stood between the danger and the flock. David knew what it meant to care for something small and helpless. And maybe, while the soldiers saw Goliath and thought, he is too big to fight, David had already learned something different in the fields. He had learned that when God is with you, Even lions and bears are not bigger than him. One day, Jesse called David.
Take this food to your brothers.
David listened carefully as his father gave him roasted grain, bread, and cheese to carry to the battlefield. David did not argue. He did not say, "But I am only a shepherd." He did not say, "Why should I be the delivery boy?" He obeyed. Early the next morning, David left the sheep with another keeper and set out. He carried the food and walked toward the camp, not knowing that his simple errand was about to become the day his whole life changed. A boy walks into the battle. David arrived at the Israelite camp just as the army was going out to the battle line. The soldiers were shouting war cries, trying to sound brave. Their voices echoed across the valley. David quickly left the supplies with the keeper and ran to greet his brothers. His eyes searched the crowd until he saw them. Eliab, Abinadab, Shammah. His older brothers stood among the soldiers, dressed for battle. David may have smiled, happy to see them safe. He may have wanted to ask, "How are you? Are you eating? Is everything all right?" But before he could settle into the moment, the ground seemed to shift. A heavy sound came from the other side. The Philistine champion stepped forward again. Goliath. His armor flashed in the sunlight. His shield-bearer walked before him, and then came the voice, that same booming voice that had shaken the army for 40 days. Goliath shouted his challenge again. "Choose a man to fight me." The words rolled through the valley. The Israelite soldiers heard him, and they ran back in fear. David watched them. His face changed. These were soldiers. These were grown men. These were warriors of Israel. Why were they running? David turned his head and looked at Goliath again. Yes, Goliath was large. Yes, his armor was strong. Yes, his voice was frightening. But David heard something deeper than a challenge. He heard disrespect toward the army of the living God. David's heart burned inside him.
What will be done for the man who defeats this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel?
King Saul had promised great reward to whoever defeated
But
Goliath.
David was not focused on riches. He was not dreaming about fame. He was disturbed that everyone was afraid while Goliath mocked God's people.
Who is this Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God?
That one sentence carried more courage than the whole army had shown in 40 days. But not everyone liked hearing David talk that way. His oldest brother, Eliab, heard him speaking with the men. Eliab became angry.
What are you doing here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness?
His words were sharp. They were the kind of words that could make someone feel small. Few sheep. As if David's work did not matter. As if David was just a nosy little brother. Eliab accused David of pride, saying he had only come to watch the battle. David could have shouted back. He could have said, "At least I'm not running like everyone else." He could have embarrassed his brother. But David did not let Eliab's anger pull him away from his purpose. Sometimes, before God uses you, people may misunderstand you. Sometimes, even family may not see what God placed inside you. But David did not allow his brother's insult to stop him. He simply asked, What have I done now? Then he turned away. That moment matters. David did not stay and argue. He did not waste his courage fighting the wrong battle. The giant was in front of him, not his brother. And little listener, that is a lesson all by itself. Not every insult deserves your attention. Not every person who misunderstands you should control your next step. David kept his heart focused. Soon, word spread through the camp. People began saying, "There is a boy asking about Goliath. He does not seem afraid." Eventually, the news reached King Saul, and Saul sent for David. David walked into the king's presence. He was young. He was not wearing armor. He was not carrying a soldier's sword, but his eyes were steady. The king looked at him. This boy wanted to fight the giant. David spoke with faith.
Let no one lose heart because of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him.
Saul looked at David and saw a boy, not a warrior, not a champion, not someone trained for battle.
You are not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth.
Saul saw David's age. He saw David's size. He saw David's lack of armor. But David remembered something Saul did not know. David remembered the field, the sheep, the lion, the bear, the moments when nobody saw him fight except God. David said, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth." David was not bragging. He was remembering. He was reminding himself and the king that God had helped him before. Then David said something powerful. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul must have stared at him. There was no fear in David's voice, only faith. Finally, Saul said, "Go, and the Lord be with you." No armor, no fear. King Saul wanted to help David prepare for battle. So he gave David his own armor, a helmet, a coat of armor, a sword. David put them on. But something was wrong. The armor was too heavy. The helmet did not feel right. The sword was not familiar in his hand. David tried to walk, but he was not used to it. He probably looked uncomfortable, like a child wearing clothes made for a grown man. Everyone around him may have thought, "At least now he looks more like a soldier." But David knew the truth. He could not fight well while pretending to be someone else. David
I
said,
cannot go in these because I am not used to them.
so he took them off. That was brave too. Because sometimes people want you to wear what worked for them. They want you to sound like them, move like them, fight like them. But David knew God had trained him differently. He did not need Saul's armor. He needed the faith God had already built in him. David picked up his shepherd's staff. Then he went to the stream. The water moved gently over the stones. David bent down and chose 5 smooth stones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He placed them in his shepherd's bag. Then he took his sling in his hand. A staff, a sling, 5 stones, and faith. That was all he carried into the valley. From far away, the Israelite soldiers watched. Maybe some shook their heads. Maybe some whispered, "He is too young." Maybe some thought, "This will not end well." On the other side, the Philistines watched too. Goliath stepped forward. He saw David coming toward him, but David did not look like a champion. He looked like a boy. No armor, no sword, no shield, just a staff in his hand. Goliath's face twisted with insult. Was Israel mocking him? Was this the best they could send? Goliath shouted, "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" Then he cursed David and threatened him. He said he would give David's flesh to the birds and wild animals. Those words were meant to scare him, but David stood firm. Maybe his heart was beating fast. Courage does not always mean your heart is quiet. Sometimes courage means your heart is pounding, but your faith stands louder than your fear. David looked at the giant. He looked at the armor. He looked at the spear. Then he spoke words that still carry power today.
You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied.
This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. He was not saying, "I am stronger than you." He was saying, "God is stronger than you." He was not trusting in his sling alone. He was trusting in the Lord. And then David said the reason for the victory before the battle even began, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Not so David could become famous, not so people could clap for him, not so his brothers would respect him, but so everyone would know God was real, present, and powerful. Goliath moved closer. The giant came forward, heavy and confident. But David did something surprising. He did not run away. He ran toward the battle line, toward Goliath, toward the danger, toward the thing everyone else feared. David reached into his bag. His fingers touched one smooth stone. He placed it in the sling. The sling began to swing, around and around, faster and faster. The air seemed to hold its breath. The soldiers watched. The Philistines watched. David's brothers watched. King Saul watched. And then David released the stone. It flew through the air, fast, straight, guided by the hand of God. The stone struck Goliath on the forehead. The giant stopped. His proud face changed. His huge body swayed. Then Goliath fell face down to the ground. The valley shook with the sound. For a moment, nobody moved. The giant who had terrified an army for 40 days was on the ground. The shouting stopped. The fear broke. The silence shattered. David had defeated Goliath, not with a sword, not with armor, not with size, but with faith in the living God. The Israelite army saw it and suddenly remembered how to be brave. They shouted and rushed forward. The Philistines saw their champion fall, and fear seized them. The boy they had laughed at had become the one God used to bring victory. And somewhere in that valley, David's brothers had to look again at the little shepherd boy they had underestimated, because God had seen what they did not see. After the battle, everyone knew David's name. But the real lesson was not just that David defeated a giant. The lesson was that David trusted God when everyone else was afraid. Goliath had looked impossible to the army, too tall, too strong, too loud, too dangerous. But David did not measure Goliath against himself. David measured Goliath against God, and that changed everything. Maybe David's quiet courage began long before the battlefield. Maybe it began when he was alone with the sheep, when nobody praised him, when nobody noticed his faithfulness, when nobody knew he was practicing with a sling, when nobody saw him protect the flock. Little listener, sometimes God prepares people in quiet places, a classroom, a bedroom, a small home, a chore nobody thanks you for, a prayer nobody hears, a moment when you choose kindness even though someone was mean, a time when you tell the truth even though lying would be easier. Those quiet places matter. David did not suddenly become brave in front of Goliath. He had been learning to trust God little by little.
Come on!
Every lion, every bear, every lonely night under the stars, every song he sang to God, every moment he protected the sheep. It was all preparation. And when the giant came, David was ready. Not because he was perfect, not because he was the biggest, not because everyone believed in him, but because he believed God was with him. There is also another lesson. David did not let his brother's words stop him. Eliab tried to make him feel small. King Saul said he was too young. Goliath laughed at him. But David did not build his courage from people's opinions. He built it from God's faithfulness. That means when people say, "You cannot do it," you do not have to believe them more than you believe God. When fear says, "You are too small," faith can answer, "God is with me." When a problem looks like a giant, you can remember that God is greater. Now, this does not mean children should run into danger or fight battles they should not fight. David's story teaches us to trust God, obey Him, and be brave in the right way. Sometimes bravery looks like praying. Sometimes bravery looks like telling the truth. Sometimes bravery looks like asking for help. Sometimes bravery looks like standing up for someone being treated unfairly. Sometimes bravery looks like doing the right thing even when others laugh. David's stone was small, but his faith was strong. And God used what David already had, not Saul's armor, not another person's sword, not something fancy. God used David's sling, David's stone, and David's trust. So, when you feel like what you have is too small, remember David. A small stone in God's hands can do what a whole army was afraid to do. That day, the valley changed. It started as a valley of fear. It became a valley of faith. It started with a giant shouting. It ended with God's people remembering that the Lord was with them. David walked into the battlefield like a shepherd boy, but he walked out as proof that God can use anyone who trusts him, even the youngest, even the smallest, even the one others overlook. So the next time fear stands tall in front of you, the next time a problem feels too big, the next time someone makes you feel too small, remember David. Do not only look at the giant, look at God, because the God who helped David in the valley is still strong, still faithful, and still able to help his children today. And that, little listener, is the whisper from today's story. When God is with you, you are never too small to be brave. Until our next little wonder in Oma's story, Nook Jr., keep your heart full of faith, your courage bright, and your ears ready for the next story God can use to teach us something beautiful.
Thanks for watching, friends. We had fun today. Subscribe, like, and comment.